Welcome to Scene Change, a podcast by the National Federation of the Blind Performing Arts Division. All about equality, opportunity, accessibility, and the arts. Here, you'll learn adaptive techniques from performers in the know. We are changing what it means to be blind, one stage at a time. Thank you for joining us today. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Scene Change. I'm Lizzy Muhammad Park, the Vice President of the National Federation of the Blind Performing Arts Division, and your host of the show. Today, we will be learning about an activity that has gotten so many people through the pandemic. It's been a stress reliever. It's, allowed people to connect with each other, all while maintaining skills that we've used in performance before the pandemic ever started. We will be discussing the virtual choir. We have Rachel Grider and Tom Page here with us today. These are two chief leaders of the NFB virtual choir, and they've been doing it for the last 2 years. Welcome to the show, Rachel.
Thank you, Lizzy. My name is Rachel Grider, and I am from California. I am the first vice president of the NFB of California. I am the president of the Central Valley chapter, and I wear several other NFB hats. I got my bachelor's in music at California State University Stanislaus with an emphasis in voice performance and composition. And I got my master's at Peabody Conservatory in Baltimore in voice performance and music theory pedagogy.
Excellent. That is really, really cool. We definitely will want to hear more about that in a minute. But first, let's jump over to Tom Page. Hey, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me today. Many of you may know me as the president of the Kansas affiliate. I'm also a musician, performer, songwriter, and audio engineer.
Yes, and that is a huge role that you play in our virtual choir. Let's start things off right at the beginning. So who approached whom about the virtual choir, and what was that process like, just starting one for the NFB?
I would say that I've got to blame it all on Rachel. She definitely approached me with this great idea, and I'm not sure how completely formed it was at that time, but I'll turn it to Rachel.
So I am a music teacher. That is my main job right now. And at the beginning of the pandemic, all of my in-person classes were canceled because of the pandemic, including the choir that I was directing. And that was very sad. So I thought about, how we could make things happen virtually. And I had received an email from another choir director talking about a virtual choir. And I thought, hey, that's a really cool idea. Why not do that for the NFB? So no, it was not fully formed when I came to Tom, but I had thought it would be cool to try. And I emailed President Riccobono and asked him if that would be something that he might want to put on our national convention. And it sort of just went from there.
Wow. So you were really inspired by the classes that you were teaching, it sounds like, and seeing, that someone else was starting a virtual choir. Is that a fair way to sum it up?
Absolutely. Yes.
So are you a part of any other virtual choirs, or was this, sort of the first one or the only one?
I did one virtual choir before we did this NFB one. So that was around May of 2020. And that was my first virtual choir experience. That's actually my only experience actually singing in a virtual choir. Since our 2020 virtual choir for convention, I also led one for the state, NFB state affiliate last convention. And then I've done a couple for the Learning Ally college success program over the summer as well.
Wow.
I've led two virtual choirs for them.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So was there any question in your mind about, accessibility? If this would work as a blind director, as a blind audio engineer, were there any questions of challenges that you might run into? with the virtual choir?
I suppose I could jump in and say that my first questions really were not concerned with accessibility, but rather, could we do it at all?
And where'd that come from?
I've had very little experience up to this time with putting together files generated in different spaces around the country. My major concern was that the audio would just sound like a big mess, and that we wouldn't end up with a listenable product at the end.
And is that because of different members recording in different spaces, or what? Where do you think the mess would come in?
Different spaces. Most of the recordings we've gotten have been created on phones or on note takers. And so there are some questions as to whether the fidelity would be usable. And then, the different spaces, a little scary. And I suspected that the process of syncing was doable, but I wasn't really sure how much work it would take or how intensive a process it would be. So there are a lot of question marks for me over the just kind of hanging around the audio production end of it.
Wow.
I think Rachel had a different perspective, of course, coming from the organizing of people end of things.
So, Rachel, what about you? Was there any question in your mind about doing the virtual choir?
So, yes, trying to think of where to start here. My first question, I think, was just making sure that we had the music in accessible format for everyone, because not everybody reads Braille music. Not everyone reads print music. We have, lots of different needs as far as, the medium of how people prefer to get their music, how they're used to getting their music in a in-person choir. So I wanted to have all of those options available, including audio recording. So, making sure that we had all of that just so that people could learn their music, structuring rehearsals over Zoom, which is very interesting in a virtual choir setting, because in an in-person choir setting, you get to hear people sing. You get to hear the choir, how it sounds, how they sound together. You can make corrections. In a Zoom choir rehearsal, everybody is on mute. So it's mostly the director playing and singing the parts. And it's amazing how exhausting that actually is to do that for 2 hours without a lot of feedback. After the first rehearsal, I was really tired just from doing that. And then you don't really get a lot of feedback as far as how things are sounding. So the only feedback you get are questions that people ask during rehearsal or after rehearsal, but you don't really get to hear what they sound like until they send you recordings, unless you work with them privately. So that was a little scary, because I had no idea, even if I could hear them one-on-one, I had no idea how it was going to sound together until Tom gave me a recording demo. So that part was definitely, I had questions up until the end, I guess. And yes, I think I had similar questions to Tom as to how would it all work? Like, how would it all come together when you have all these different recordings? And I did listen to the recordings as they were coming in. And so I could hear, there were different devices, different file formats. And, I wondered how that was really going to come together. And I was very pleasantly surprised and happy that it came together very nicely.
Wow.
Certainly Rachel's skill as a teacher is evident here. As these files came in, I became more and more emboldened with the idea that this process was going to work. And a big part of it is that people had actually learned parts. And it became fairly obvious that, most of the altos were singing from the same sheet of music, so to speak, and the same with the other sections.
Thanks. And I have to say, to add something, because for the state convention, I actually did the audio editing myself. I don't know if I will ever do that again, quite frankly. That was well, and part of it was I'd never done it before, so I really was learning as I went, and it just really drove home how amazing and how much work Tom and other audio editors who've done this have to put into this, because it is so, it's one thing to teach the music, it's another thing to put it together and make it sound good, and it's hours and hours of work. So it's kudos to Tom and to Kyle, our audio editor from this year, for making this all work.
Yes, big shout out to Kyle. He also had not done a process like this before. And so much like Rachel jumping into the fire on the state convention in California, he really jumped in this year and took the reins on the audio editing and did a great job.
Yes, he did.
He really did. And it's interesting that both of you kind of said that there was not a question of blindness in this. It was really a question of, musical technicality and then the audio technicality. So I'm very happy to hear that for anyone out there who's listening and, interested in doing some sort of a virtual choir, this is doable from this, it sounds like this is very doable. Now, did either of you, because they were very, audio and music specific questions, did either of you consult any, friends or books or YouTube about running a virtual choir, or did you both just kind of go into it with these sort of questions and thoughts and just kind of figure it out as you went along?
I did. Actually, I actually reached out to Kayleigh Brendle, who is the director for Sing for Serenity, which is another virtual choir, which I believe is all blind singers, if I recall correctly. Okay, cool. So, and she was also a scholarship winner this year.
That's right. Go class of 2021.
I know, right? So I reached out because I actually have a student who sings with her. And so I had heard about it. And then when I had reached out to President Riccobono, he had, suggested maybe consulting with her. So I talked to her and I kind of got her idea about how she does it. And she does it in a very organized, a lot more organized than I did, I think, because she uses section leaders and she does different things because it's an ongoing year-round choir. But I also got the idea from the other virtual choir that I sang in, and the way he ran rehearsals, I basically ran them the same way that he did it. And then now that was a little different because it was a video choir. And so that was a whole nother aspect of, making the recording. But, I used the same idea of doing the count in, which, I got that either from them, and then Tom confirmed that was a good idea. So yeah, so I think I picked up things from both places.
Yeah. I had heard a couple of my friends talk about doing Zoom church, and I kind of wondered how that worked and asked them about church choirs over Zoom, and they told me it's a big mess and it doesn't really work at all. And so that's mostly what I got on that, was it was a big mess and didn't work, and that it comes out sounding like when Zoom jams, basically just meh. And so did a little bit of thinking about how one would put together these different audio files from different sources, and just went back to what I would call basic audio editing techniques. There are probably some fancier methods using a snap to grid sort of a concept, but really what we did was what Rachel was saying. We used a count in, and then I just synced things to that count.
Awesome. Okay, so we will get more in detail with some audio information later in the show. And another sneak peek for later in the show is that Kayleigh Brendle will be joining us, not on this segment, but in a segment that we are starting up called Questions with Katelyn, where we may pull in some surprise guests here on Scene Change. So be on the lookout for that. And before we delve into some more technical behind the scenes information, Rachel, how did you go about finding the talent for the choir?
So the first year in 2020, I now I'm trying to remember. I reached out to the NFB Performing Arts Division and the NFB Net members list, and I think several other listservs, probably the Performing Arts listserv, and basically just said, I'm looking for singers for this project. Is anyone interested? Got lots of takers, especially after President Riccobono announced it on the presidential release, which was really helpful in getting singers, and there were many singers that did it, and it was not, there's no audition involved. It was just, anybody who wants to sing, come and sing, no matter what level. And I tried to have, different music, different varieties of music, so that, it would be of interest to as many people as possible. And I even said, if you don't want to record all 3 songs, that's okay. You can just 1 or 2, it's fine. We just want to hear you sing. So, got lots of takers. And then this year, pretty much, I think we went about it the same way. We had a choir form that people were to fill out and posted it all kinds of places on the Performing Arts Division list, and on listservs, and it was lots of people wanted to do it, and then of course I reached out directly just to people who had done it last year, who I thought might want to do it again, or people who I knew might be interested. So that was also, I did a little bit of that as well, but it was mostly just from advertising on NFB listservs.
Wow. And from there, people were able to just kind of, jump in at their own level of comfort. And I really like the way you did it, where you said, you don't have to do, there's no pressure, so that's cool. And that does leave this as sort of a way to perform, to relieve stress. Now I'd like to know if you could walk us through a typical rehearsal.
Okay, well, the typical rehearsal, I would try to, give some time in the beginning to ask questions. So the thing about a virtual choir is that it is a lot of learning on your own. The rehearsals are really more just sort of reinforce. At least that's how I see them. But by the beginning of a rehearsal, everyone should have had time, or should have had the opportunity to go over whatever we're going to go over in the rehearsal that day. So it's not new information. So say we're going to rehearse, one of our songs was "You'll Never Walk Alone," this last convention, and so in the rehearsal that I'm planning to rehearse that, I will have already put out the audio recordings, the music, braille music, sheet music, everything, all the materials are already there on the in the Dropbox folder on the website, so that people can access them. So then at the beginning of the rehearsal, I'll take questions about anything throughout the week, anything that people, actually most of the questions would be more just the general questions, and then we'll do a warm-up. I'll go through warm-ups for people, vocal warm-ups, for people to go along, to mute themselves and sing along with. And then we will rehearse. And essentially I will, play parts. I'll go over parts, sort of review parts, soprano parts, alto parts, tenor parts, bass parts. And we will, divide the song into segments. We'll stop every, after each segment or so to answer questions if people want to hear a part again. And then, we'll run run segments together. It sort of depends on, you know, the comfort level of everybody. If they're ready to, you know, try to run stuff. Again, I don't get to hear their singing, so it's all everything I do is based on the feedback I get from them during rehearsal. So after we've sort of, you know, gone through parts, we will you know, maybe run the whole thing at the end perhaps, and you know, and I'll screen share if we already had the actual track for recording ready, which we didn't always, that wasn't ready in the beginning of the project, but you know, toward the end, you know, we had the tracks for recording, so I would play that over the over screen share and let people hear it and sing with it, and then I'd take more questions at the end, and then that would essentially be our rehearsal.
Wow. So you're really trusting people to know their own voices, to know what they're struggling with, and so on in a virtual choir. Whereas in an in-person choir, the musical director can listen and say, no, that's not it. You know?
Exactly.
Okay.
So what I would do, the other thing that now this is where I think, you know, if we did this if this wasn't just a one convention project, does that make sense? If we did this as a year-round thing, I would maybe do things more along the lines of how Kayleigh in Sing for Serenity does it, where there are section leaders and there's a little more of the one-on-one training, or one-on-one rehearsing and such, because that way you do get to have more feedback as to how things are going, if that makes sense. But for this, what I did was I did offer if anyone wanted to rehearse privately or work privately with me, and there were several other people in the choir who also really took that on as well and offered to help people who might want to work on parts. So, and that was really, really helpful to have those individuals who stepped up and worked and helped folks learn parts. And so I did some private sort of private lessons or rehearsals, or I don't know, you know, whatever you want to call them, with some folks to, you know, work with them on their parts. And that was really helpful, because that did give me feedback as to how people were learning their parts, and then I also offered, you know, if people wanted to send me recordings ahead of time, just sample recordings, you know, to get feedback, that was totally fine as well. So that way I could get some, you know, some insight, and they could get insight too if there was something that they needed to change with their recording.
Was there ever a time during rehearsal where you might screen share the backtrack, you know, background music, and you were not singing, but instead had people singing on their own so that they could sort of get used to singing alone for their audio file?
So that is exactly what we did, in fact.
Okay.
So when I screen shared, everyone was on mute, including, well, like, I don't know if I was on mute, but I wasn't singing. Everyone was on mute. So that was the idea of that they were singing, because if I were singing along with a backing track on Zoom, that would just be a mess.
I see.
So yeah, so that was what we would always do, at least some of that, either at the end of each rehearsal or, you know, sometime in the rehearsal, where they would actually get to screen share. We'd screen share a track, either a practice track or the track for recording, so that they could sing along with it.
And was there ever, for those who learn by ear, was there ever a time when you might sing along with the music? Maybe not during the rehearsal, since that wouldn't really work well over Zoom. I didn't think about that. But where you would just sort of sing it so that people could hear it?
Yes. So every song that we did had I made demo recordings for each part. So, and Kyle Woodruff also really helped with that too. He helped by creating the tenor and bass parts for the songs. So So yes, so they did have recorded audio tracks for each part, as well as resource to music for those who wanted it.
Excellent.
Say that helped me a lot to have those demos also, and that Rachel and Kyle really acted as the section leaders in terms of providing those model tracks for people to study. And then also, of course, from my perspective, it helped me understand this is kind of what it's supposed to sound like. And so if there's, a particular singer that's not in rhythm or not on pitch or whatever, I was able to kind of screen those against the models and adjust accordingly.
As a Braille music reader, even though I read Braille music, I still find I really find those audio tracks not only super helpful when doing something like this, but also necessary, I think, because people aren't able to hear the singers around them. If I were in an in-person choir, I would have my whole soprano section I could hear, and I could, I'd have an idea, even if I know in theory when a cutoff is supposed to be, for example, I would, it's, there's still so many other factors, and it's just really easy. It's really helpful, and I think essential in a virtual choir to have that audio track to just create some life and some just make it real and make it give them an idea, this is exactly what it should sound like, basically.
I should say my only real choir experience in life was in junior high school, where I sang in the choir. And I imagine that a lot of time in-person choirs is spent with people learning how to round their voice or shape their mouths, if you will, so that they sing together in a tone. And I do remember we had a lot of like I-E-O kind of training during the junior high time. And as you're alluding to, Rachel, it's very difficult to understand how your neighbor's voice will mesh with yours when you never get to hear that. And so I think it was really important to have those model tracks, and that really did help things.
And Tom, it almost seems like you were the filter in a way to make sure that the blend was achieved, because you were kind of the one who got to hear everyone's tracks, right?
Yes, I think I did get to have the bonus of as the tracks came in, I was the person that got to hear them together first. I just tried really to imagine what it would be like to have all the people in a big room on a big riser, and how that would sound as a whole, and then go from there. And I think, as you're hearing from Rachel's description of her ideas of how to get this together and lead the project, she has a very community-based choir outlook for this. And I thought that was very appealing. And to me, what that meant was, if you have a particular singer in a particular section who might be a little loud and brassy, guess what? That's who they are. And if we were together in person, you'd be saying, oh man, so-and-so in the sopranos is always singing a little too loud, whatever. And so to that extent, I mean, I think there is a penchant for audio engineers to want to strive for perfection at all times. And it was a good experience for me to say, no, we really want to preserve the humanity of this. And so if somebody is a little out, what stature of person is their voice? Are we talking about a very large person with a big booming resonant voice? Well, they're going to be heard. Is this a very small person with a tiny voice? They may not be as big in the mix, but they're still going to be in there. And so that was sort of the part I got to have fun with, of imagining the group together and then layering up the sounds.
I bet you really got to feel people's personalities through their their singing voices. Sometimes you really can tell.
Oh yes. And sometimes the other, the fun part, the other stuff that was in their the files that they sent in, you can hear what's happening in the background of people's apartments, or the city noises where they live, or the country noises where they live. And so that's kind of neat too, just to feel the diversity of folks who were contributing.
Now, did you have to, Tom, ask anyone who was, maybe they had that big booming voice and maybe it was a little too much and maybe your equipment couldn't quite turn it down enough? Did you kind of just let it shine, or did you ever ask for re-records?
Mostly let it shine was the approach. Okay. I don't think there might have been a couple re-records. They were mostly due to noise factors, really. And I let the singing coaching portion of the thing rest entirely on the able shoulders of Rachel. So if I had some questions or concerns about a particular part, I basically expressed those to her, and she did the one-on-one coaching to work with that. Because really, I'm to be fair, not a vocal music instructor, and I joke about these things, but it's like I will demand my tempo. And you're going to need to be on pitch, and that's that probably would be the end of my instructional set for singers.
Wow. And you know what? I like that, the two of you seem to work really well together. And it really comes from knowing both of your roles and respecting the other person's role. And that's really coming through in this interview. So Rachel, I'm going to jump back over to you. And I'd like to know, could you describe any techniques that you use as a musical director specifically in the virtual choir?
Oh my goodness. Okay. Well, in the virtual choir, so I feel like, in the rehearsals themselves, mostly it's plunking out parts on the piano. Essentially, I don't feel like, we do warm-up techniques. Like I'll do with them the same warm-ups that I would do with an in-person choir, or even with my one-on-one voice students. And then I will, and I'll try to encompass all the parts. I'll do some warm-ups for the altos and basses, and then for the tenor and soprano, so trying to encompass the entire range, at least the range of whatever we're going to be rehearsing that day. And then we will, it's mostly plunking out parts, but I will work with people one-on-one when they want it, as I said before, and that will, I'll treat them just like I would any of my voice students. We will work on their song or whatever. I expect them, I try to treat my students like adults, my young students I should say, where I will tell them, I will ask them, okay, what is it that you need? Where do you feel is your most challenging part in this? What is the biggest challenge for you? And then they'll tell me, and then we will go over that, and then we'll do whatever needs to be done to fix it. So with the virtual choir singers, they are mostly adults, and they know what it is that they need help with. And sometimes it's, let's just run through, can I run through ritmo, or can I run through the tenor part for You'll Never Walk Alone? Like, okay, let's hear it, and they'll, they just want to see if they're doing it right, and if there's anything that they need to fix. And so sometimes it's like, okay, this is good. I don't think there's anything that you need to fix on this. This is great. And other times it's let's go over this part. Sometimes they want to talk about breath support and how they, when they need to breathe, how to stagger breathe, because that's one really difficult thing to do in a virtual choir. In in-person choir, if you have a long note or a long phrase, you can stagger breathe, meaning you're breathing in a different place than the people near you. So to the audience, it doesn't sound like anybody's breathing. But in a virtual choir, you don't really have that option, because you don't have people near you. So learning how to take as quick a breath as possible, and breathing in a place that won't be as noticeable if there's a long phrase or a long note. For example, at the end of "You'll Never Walk Alone," there was a very long phrase at the end, or super long note, and there was a lot of stagger breathing going on, and it actually worked out really well in the audio editing, which was great. But yeah, a lot of people wanted to work on breath support at the end of that song, so we would work on it, and I would give them some breathing exercises, and we would do some of those together, and then we would work on that passage. So I think, so yes, I think the techniques I use, at least in the one-on-one, is very similar to what I use with my students, only more tailored to the choir itself. And I try to let these singers, kind of call the shots as to what they need to learn, what they need help with, and what kind of feedback they're looking for. And then I try to give that to them.
So one thing that I'm noticing about the virtual choir is that it seems like it's a lot more independent and also student run. It almost reminds me of college. It's like, when you were first describing it, it was reminding me of the difference between, in high school, you have a lot more direction, but in college, it's up to you. It's up to you to read the material and then come to class and discuss it, be ready to discuss it or ask questions that you have, already prepared. You have the material, and then you kind of you're trusted to go and do it yourself and come in and ask for the information that you need.
There were a lot of self-starters in the group. There was a certain amount of requirement that somebody would have to actually peruse these materials and be prepared. Rachel only had so much time to, call around the country and get individuals motivated.
That is so cool. So that's, yet another tip for anyone listening who's interested in getting involved in a virtual choir. Good to know for sure. Now, Rachel, you actually wrote Stronger Together. Is that correct?
That's right.
Could you share with us what motivated you to write the song? And also, how did singing an original piece affect the choral experience?
President Riccobono had actually mentioned that maybe this was a good year for an original song, just kind of, in passing. And it had occurred to me because I have been struggling myself a little bit with just the recent events, the that have been happening with the NFB. And I felt like this song was sort of my statement regarding those events, if that makes sense. It was a way for me to express my love and respect and desire to help the NFB membership in whatever way I can, and also, to express the solidarity and the diversity in our organization with members that I want to help achieve, continue to achieve in the NFB. Does that make sense? And so that was sort of what inspired the song. And I wanted to have something that was specific to the members, not something necessarily about the NFB as a whole, but about the members of the NFB, and something that would maybe make people feel welcome, and that would also even address a little bit some of the things that have happened. There's a line in there that about the pains from the past, but then hope and healing and victory at last. So that was sort of my statement, I think, regarding those events, but also moving forward and being strong as members, and celebrating the diversity and the contributions that everyone can make and does make every day to the blindness movement.
That's awesome, Rachel. Thank you so much for sharing that. It's, as you were speaking, especially as you were quoting that line from the song, got the chills. It's true. It's very, it's a song that definitely strikes feelings of, love, hope, and determination, as we always say in the Federation. And I think that everything that you wanted to come across definitely did come across in the song and in the final performance. So we're actually going to move into talking about how performances are created, and I think, Tom, that's a lot of what um, is your job in all this. So you mentioned, originally having questions about how the quality would turn out. So the big question is, how'd you pull it off?
Well, some computer magic is part of the story. Gating is a wonderful thing, which is a process that can be applied to audio where a person sets a threshold, a volume threshold in essence. And so if the signal drops below that threshold, then you have a kind of a pre-made fade out time that you apply. So let's say if you do it too radically, it sounds choppy and like it would cut out somebody's voice. But if you do it at the right threshold and the right fade out time, it comes across feeling fairly natural, and it eliminates the background noises that were in the files. We also did have some pre-thinking and coaching on helping folks to make better files with their phones. We discovered pretty quickly that there were different settings in the phones that you could change to get a higher fidelity file. And then also, some things I've just learned over the years with really low tech recording, which is if you can get yourself into a really small space, a closet or something like that, it sounds less roomy than if you're, say, in your living room or a kitchen. And even, you could put a towel, you could be under a towel or under a sheet is a good way to achieve what is called proximity effect, where the voice sounds like it's close to the microphone. So those techniques and strategies really did work. From there, really, I guess I have to defer back to Rachel that, the director and the work of Rachel and Kyle as acting as section leaders really is what produced the performances from the individuals. And all I did was put all of those performances together with the computer magic to where they appeared to be in one space.
Wow. And could you just rattle off maybe some of the apps or the tech that you use to achieve that?
No problem. I guess I should mention, of course, I am a blind person. I use JAWS screen reader. This was all done under Windows with JAWS. It's a silly acronym, Digital Audio Workstation. Has a lovely DAW is how they say things these days. And so the DAW that I use is Cakewalk Sonar, a little dated now, but the folks at Dancing Dots years ago programmed scripts for the Sonar so it would work with JAWS, and it still does for me. And so also used the SoundForge audio editing program on the back end for 2-track mastering purposes.
I really have no idea what you're talking about.
Okay,
I'm just asking for
fine.
The people who are. I'm asking for the people someone's going to say.
Yes, I imagine Shane is using Pro Tools maybe, which is the modern way of doing these things.
I think he uses something called the Gold Wave or something. I don't know. He just said it yesterday. That's the only reason why I know that.
There you go. That's a popular one. No, it
Gold
works.
Wave and Reaper all the way.
Okay, there you go. See, and I think I should be looking at Reaper. Yeah. Okay. Sorry.
That should definitely help our listeners and those of you out there who are audio engineers and know about this stuff. If you have more questions, feel free to send them our way, nfbpad@gmail.com. And we just might do an audio engineering episode, but Shane or someone else may have to host that because I'm not going to know what I'm talking about. But I will ask questions if people send them to me, or I will gladly yield my position for that episode. Rachel, I want to jump over to you and ask, as far as the final performance video side, we've talked a lot about the audio and music and singing that goes into it. How did you decide on the video that you would play with the songs? And, what was that like?
So there wasn't a video. We didn't do a video. We did pictures. But we didn't do a video. We talked about doing a video. We talked about it both last year and this year, in fact, but it was kind of decided that was a little too complicated. So we just did pictures. So last year what we did, because one of the songs we did was Live the Life You Want. And so we had people send in pictures of themselves doing things that was showing how they were living the lives they wanted, or living the life they want. So that was really cool because we got some really, really interesting things. We had somebody shooting at a target in a shooting gallery. We had, I believe we had somebody riding a horse or a camel or something. I can't remember now, but it was a lot of really neat pictures. And then this year we didn't do anything quite as exciting as far as the visual aspect. We mostly just had people send in, their headshots, and those were featured on the website. And I'm not sure what exactly was featured on the YouTube, if they had the pictures on the YouTube video with the choir, the choir songs. But yeah, there was no actual video, not this year at least.
I remember a part where you had people send in voice clips, was it? And it was something.
Yes.
What's that? What was that piece? Could you describe that? Yeah.
That was Stronger Together. The end of Stronger Together. And so it took a while to figure out what I wanted to do and what we wanted to do really at the end of that, because I wanted to have something special at the end of Stronger Together, to show diversity. And so I actually talked with several people, including President Riccobono and some other folks, just to kind of get their ideas and such. And so we decided to do sound clips. So we had everybody would send in. So I made a script of different professions, characteristics, just all these different characteristics that we have in our federation, religions, professions, sexual orientations, ethnicities. I mean, just, so many different, all mixed together. And then adjectives, describing, individuals, just whatever. And then I asked, I basically first started, I asked different people, I reached out to the choir first and asked, if anybody identifies, here is the script of what is going to be said at the end of Stronger Together. Is there anything that should be added to the script that I missed? And do any of you identify with any of these characteristics, and would you be willing to read them? And I got lots of people who wanted to read, and it was also really cool because there were some people that couldn't make the actual choir recording, but they were able to make that recording. So it was a cool way to get some folks involved who may not have otherwise been involved in the choir. And then I also had people from outside the choir. I reached out to some people that I knew. Like, it was really, for example, it was hard to find a blind doctor, a medical doctor, because I really wanted, not that it was hard, it wasn't actually hard, it was just I didn't know any. So I reached out to someone. Actually, I had I got a contact from someone from the choir and reached out to this blind doctor. And so there were some that I reached out to privately because no one had claimed the line, but and most of the lines were covered. I think there were a couple that weren't, that we couldn't get, but for the most part, everything was covered. So what they did was they said, we are all together. And then there was followed this list of characteristics, and it was really cool because you had all these different voices, different, just just different voices, saying different things. And it was fantastic. I mean, it was so cool because you could, it just really, I feel like helped to emphasize, our diversity. And then at the end, everyone says, and we are blind and we are stronger together. And so yeah, I thought it was pretty awesome.
Very
I thought this
powerful.
was a really fun part of the experience also. And I commend Rachel on this this creative element. As the script unfolded and was being bounced around between Rachel and President Riccobono and others in the email, it was also just a fine exercise in recognizing how we are all intersectional people, and that the characteristic of blindness is intersectional with every other possible characteristic of humanity you can imagine. And so I think part of the fun part of I really just participated by reading the emails and encouraging, but part of the fun part was recognizing how many characteristic words apply, and coming up with a list that was pretty focused. I think it was great. Also, I do remember we had to work a little bit on cadence, so that hopefully we would end up with something that was editable, where, say, when people were saying "we are," they weren't all saying it like "we are" as opposed to "we are." But it did end up working out in the end, and the splicing part was also pretty fun and enjoyable. And another big shout out to Kyle Woodruff for being the engineer for 2021, who got to have a lot of that fun.
Wow. And it all culminated in this, powerful, diverse, just really motivational piece. And for our other members, of the Federation, where, I wasn't in the choir, but, sitting at the banquet and just watching that was like, wow, that's so cool. And I was actually sitting at the table with another 2021 scholarship winner, Miranda Williams, and she was a part of that. And that's, we were like, oh, your part's coming. So we all got really quiet and, just listened and watched that. And it was so cool. So that was probably my favorite part of the virtual choir, just seeing the diversity and just watching everyone and hearing everyone say those words together. It really made an impact. So you all did a really great job on the virtual choir the past 2 years. Kudos to the both of you.
Thank you.
Thank
you had
you.
asked about the video a little while ago. And maybe this is a point to actually solicit, if this was to come around that we ever did it again, it would be great to have video. And I had discovered a limitation in my skill set after doing the virtual choir work in 2020. The Illinois affiliate asked if I could help them with doing some audio editing for their Braille is Beautiful convention reading. And at that time, I imagined that I could actually edit the Zoom video in line with the Zoom audio. And what I found out was that my software actually just disregards the video content when I do it. And so I was very hopeful that that was just going to work in the same way, but it did not. And so perhaps in the future, if there is somebody out there who has that skill set and software understanding, we'd love to have them as part of the team.
Awesome. Yes. Anyone out there who, as Tom just said, has the whatever it takes. I have no idea what it takes to do the video piece of it. Definitely, get in touch with Tom or Rachel, and they are going to give their information out in just 1 second. So thank you both for giving us a behind the scenes sneak peek at what it takes to run a virtual choir and what the experience is like from both the member and leadership side. It was lovely having you both on today. And Anytime. And same to you, Rachel.
Thank you.
Please do share any contact information or social media. How can people get in touch with either of you, both of you? How can they get involved in the choir? Hopefully we'll be in person next year. But if this should ever happen in the future, where do they go?
So my email address is rachel.grider, rachel.grider @gmail.com. And I would very much hope that we can do another virtual choir next year, another choir next year. Whether it's virtual or in person will remain to be seen. I have gotten some feedback that even if we are in person, I think some people want at least one virtual choir song as well. So we might do that. And but if we are in person, I definitely would like to also explore the idea of doing an in-person choir at convention.
I hope that we could find a way to integrate both virtual and in person. You can find me at topage@swbell.net, and that's my first and middle initial, T&O, and my last name, PAGE, and again at swbell.net, and that's like Southwestern Bell for people that remember that era of telephone connectivity. You can find me at Tom Page ICT, and that's like ice cream truck. That's the airport code for where I live. On the Facebook, you can find my professional life under haymakersict.com if you're so inclined.
Thank you both for sharing that information. Keep in mind that the virtual choir sang 3 songs this year: You'll Never Walk Alone, Stronger Together, and Ritmo. Do search for these songs on YouTube and see if you can't catch other snippets of our 2021 NFB convention. And be sure to stay tuned for Questions with Katelyn, featuring our special guest, Kayleigh Brendle.
Hello and welcome to Questions with Katelyn. This is Katelyn McIntyre, president of the National Federation of the Blind Performing Arts Division. And today I have with me Kayleigh Brendle, founder and director of the Sing for Serenity Choir. Kayleigh, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I am honored to be here. I love the Performing Arts Division and the NFB as a whole. So thank you for having me on.
Thank you. We're so glad to have you. And you're from New Jersey and have a bit of musical background yourself. So first tell us about you and how you first got into music and what you do.
So I've been singing all my life. My parents literally told me that when I was 4 years old, I'd be singing Sesame Street to passersby. It's just always been a part of my life. I am lucky to have perfect pitch. I have synesthesia, so I can see colors in music. And so music is always just a really big part of my life, and, an amazing experience to be a part of because it involved multiple senses. And, last Friday I dropped my first album called Karma, and to say that I have an album out is really surreal. And, I actually had a release party that night with a bunch of Serenity choir people, and we all just got on and we had so much fun just my album. And it was a really amazing night. I couldn't have imagined spending it with any other crowd of people.
Congratulations. That is so great. So happy for you. Wonderful. Well, let's talk about the Serenity Choir. So how did you, what made you want to start a virtual choir, and how did you begin? How did you get started?
So when I was in 8th grade, I was elected to be president of my school's chapter of the National Junior Honor Society. And as our service learning projects approached, my friend said that for hers, she was going to, because the service learning project entailed doing something that would benefit the community at large. She said that she was going to orchestrate a veterans awareness fundraiser. And I said, what would be interesting? I have a lot of friends around the New Jersey area that in New Jersey, in Pennsylvania, in New York, and they love singing. What if, and they're all blind, so what if we assembled a little vocal group and we performed at your event? And that would be my project. And she was like, yes, that would work great. So I started, assembling the forces and getting everything together. And I had so many friends that I'd met from the Braille Challenge. The Braille Challenge finals are in LA every year. Kids from across the country would come. And so while there for many years, I met amazing singers from all over the country. And so I had many of them reaching out to me and saying, hey, can we participate? And I was like, I'm so sorry, but no, it's just tri-state. And then unfortunately, my friend's event didn't end up taking place. But it was almost a blessing in disguise, because then I could then turn around to those people and say, actually, yes, you can. We'd love to have you. And so I turned it into this national choir for my project. And we started on Skype. We started making little videos of singing. We worked on this song called Beautiful by Christina Aguilera. And,
Nice.
I really didn't even think of choir parts at that point. It was just individual solos making up the entire song. And then the year ended, and technically my obligations to the choir ceased. But I remember at that point, it wasn't even called Serenity. I was not very gifted in the naming sector at that point, because I called it the Sing for the Spring Choir, which I look back cringe. But you know what? I remember saying to someone, I don't want it to be just the spring. I want it to be forever. And I never looked back. And I was like, okay, I need something that's alliterative. And so, okay, it was Sing for Serenity, because sing for peace, sing for tranquility, and sing for love. And
Love that.
we thank you so much. It really is at the core of what we do. And so we'd moved to an app called Team Talk, which was suggested to us. And Team Talk allows you to have different channels for individual voice parts, and, create sub channels from there if people need one-on-one instruction. And so that's how we started operating. And then we worked on a piece called White Christmas. There was about 6 of us that recorded for that. We were still a very small group, but we were a very tight-knit group. And, we just kept growing and growing. And I just knew this was something like I was never going to let go of. If I had any say in the matter, I was never going to let go of it. And then we had, we were all girls too. And then we had our first boy come in February. I was like, I don't know what to do with you. Like, I was trying to figure this out, because I was like, I don't know how to do this. But we kind of
love it.
I catered all my arrangements to his range. And so we were soprano, alto, mezzo, and then this boy. So it was very funny. And then we had, some more boys. And now we are soprano, mezzo, alto, tenor, bass. And it became this 5-part thing. And in some arrangements, it's 8 parts, because it can split each of the girl parts in half.
Wow,
and
that's great.
Then we had adults that wanted part of it. And it just kept, and the international people that wanted a part of it. Now, lo and behold, 4 years later, 15 countries, over 100 members, like girls and boys alike. Just this whole amazing family.
Oh, that's so great. And how did you spread the word? I mean, it sounds like a lot of it was just word of mouth, but how did you grow it and gather all those participants? That's amazing.
It was quite frankly word of mouth. We had a lot of people that Schools for the Blind were definitely our friends in this, because we have shout out to New York Institute for Special Education, shout out to Florida School for the Deaf and the Blind. We had a lot of schools for the blind that once one person joined, that entire choral fabric of that school joined. Like, literally, we have a lot of the New York choir, because the word just traveled. And then, social media, I think Facebook, there's a nice blind musical community on Facebook. And so we're definitely present there. Instagram, we spotlight some of our members. We have a division of singers, or we have a division of blind and visually impaired individuals that don't really like to sing, but still want to be a part of the family. And so we create the monologue team division. So if you hear people giving intros and outros in our videos, that's them. If you see our social media being active with member spotlights or informational posts, that's them. So they really at the core of what we do too.
So inclusive. That is wonderful. Wow. And so what is your process for selecting and arranging songs?
Okay, so I'm going to take you through an example piece, because I think that's going to illustrate how we work best. So last year, we had a group of blind senior citizens, many of which actually are affiliated with the NFB, and they are called the We See 2 Peer Support Group, and they're housed out of New Jersey. And their president contacted me and said, hey, we've seen what your group can do. Can you dedicate a piece to our group, our little family here? And I was like, we'd be honored, like, absolutely. And so we worked collaboratively with them to select a piece that we felt would be consistent with their mission and with ours. And our kind of happy medium was That's What Friends Are For by Dionne Warwick, and featuring Stevie Wonder, of course, and other amazing musicians. And so it was very low for a lot of our female singers, because the majority of our singers are not altos. And so, the and I, like that would be kind of low for something to hit. And so I was like, okay, as I'm arranging this, let's modulate the key. And so it became F sharp major instead of D sharp major.
Ooh,
and so we found a piano instrumental online, and I just transposed it. And then what I do with arranging is, sometimes I'll take an existing arrangement online, and I'll simplify it a little bit or change it, tweak it to fit my choir's range. And other times I'll just make one from scratch. So in that case, I made one from scratch. And first I decide where to put the solos, because solo auditions, everybody gets so excited for solo auditions because, there'll be the 5 or 6 that I pick, and then there'll be the 5 or 6 honorable mentions. So everyone gets excited. And, I use honorable mentions to kind of tell people you need to keep auditioning because you are right there. You are so close to getting one.
Yeah.
And, so I gave out, I think, 5 solos for that song, and then some solos for international members. And then once I figured out where I wanted the solos to be, I would sit down on my piano and start messing around with chords and just kind of experiment and then try stuff out, like sing stuff in GarageBand and see if the harmonies work. And just kind of, I can't quite explain the arranging process. It's almost like you just have to see what works and what doesn't.
Yeah.
And just try stuff out and let the music guide you. And then once it's done, I would send the full arrangement out so people can hear what the harmonies will sound like when they're together. And then I will, for the soprano part, for example, I would mute the bass, tenor, alto, and mezzo tracks, and then send the recording back with the instrumental and the soprano part. And then that's what they all would record with. They all would record a track with that track and then mute my track and send theirs back. And then the editors would compile all those tracks, God bless them, all those tracks into one project and do panning and volumes and EQ and all these other terms that I have no idea what they mean because I'm not in any way an editor. I do so much for them. But, at every rehearsal, their section leaders would be, if people need one-on-one instruction, they would be teaching them. If people prefer to be, alone, they would listen to them say it through once they got it. And we just kind of take it week by week.
That's so good. Thank you for explaining that whole process. I find that absolutely fascinating. And what an undertaking that you have, developed such a great process for all of this. So the rehearsals you mentioned are on Team Talk. And then what do they use to record their parts? How do people go in and do that?
It varies. You'll have Hokusai, you'll have GarageBand, you'll have Reaper.
Yeah.
Usually one of those 3.
Right.
Because
and then,
you need something you have headphones for.
Right.
Because the track will be playing in headphones and you'll be singing, out loud. So you need something like that.
Perfect. And then the editors, what do they use to make that magic happen?
I believe most of them use either Hokusai or Reaper.
That's great. Wow. It's so wonderful what you can do. You will all hear in a moment the beautiful sounds of Sing for Serenity with such great blends, and you guys just put on a great show. So where do you, air quote, perform? Where can people listen to you, and what are you guys preparing for?
So all of our individual songs are up on YouTube. If you type in Sing for Serenity Choir on YouTube, you'll see our channel and you'll see, I really love scrolling back to our first performance and just seeing how we've grown. It's a really cool journey. You'll hear some pieces are dedicated to specific groups or people. Like this past summer, we released a piece called Speechless, which was dedicated to a person in Serenity who is also in the NFB. And she survived COVID, but it was a very, very intense battle with it. And she was hospitalized. And you hear her talk about that before the piece starts. And then you hear her say, this was my motivation not to go down, not to go speechless. And then the piece starts and she sings the solo and we back her. And, then you have Blessings where the girl lost her mother. And, someone that you all know, he's on there too. And he had lost his father. And so, both of them are talking about how much this piece means to them. And then you hear, them singing. So you hear all these different dedications and all the social medias that we have, the Instagram, the Twitter, the Facebook, they all kind of lead you back to that YouTube because singing is at the core of what we do. Yes, you have to post and, talk about everything, but we love to sing more than anything else. And that's That's who we are.
That's beautiful. And what a testament to the power of music. So healing and just brings people together from all over the world, as you said, 15 countries. That's incredible.
Thank you.
I love it. So, and where can people go if they would like to join the Sing for Serenity choir?
You can email singforserenity@gmail.com. That's SINGFORSERENITY@gmail.com. You can also DM us on Instagram, the Sing for Serenity Choir Instagram. You can, tweet us on Twitter, but Instagram, you can message us on Facebook. So Instagram, Facebook, or Gmail, I think would be the best ways to communicate us.
And Facebook and Instagram are Sing for Serenity?
Sing for Serenity Choir. It's
Sing
always
Serenity Choir. All right.
The only one that's just Sing for Serenity is the Gmail.
Gotcha. Okay. Sing for Serenity Choir on Facebook and Twitter. That is where everyone can go and find you and follow you. Instagram. Sorry. Facebook and Instagram. I'll say that again. Sing for Serenity Choir is where everyone can go on Facebook and Instagram and follow you and keep up with your updates. That is so exciting. So now we get the privilege of, in a moment, hearing a wonderful seasonal tune to celebrate the holidays approaching. A little bit of It's Beginning to Look a Lot Like Christmas. But as we go, Kayleigh, any thoughts on the power of virtual choirs or where you see this going in the future?
I would say that especially during the COVID-19 pandemic, the power of virtual choirs became extremely apparent because as the world shut down, we were the one thing that remained constant. And it was very comforting for a lot of our members because as everything else was taken, we were not. And we were very used to it. I mean, everyone was figuring out how to do the virtual choir thing, but we had been doing it for years. And, we are a family at our core too. And so we gave them a prom this past year, a little virtual prom. And, we have Halloween parties in a couple weeks. We have a holiday party in December. And, so we just ensure that there's always that community engagement piece and that people from different sections are getting to, mix and get to know each other. I mean, we've had lasting friendships. We've had romantic relationships. We've had we call her the Serenity moms. Like we've had mothers with children, being very nurturing to our little guys. It's just this whole network. And I think that's the beauty of the virtual choir is that it doesn't matter how close or far you live. It just matters if you can pick up the phone, make sure somebody's okay, and just sing and forget about everything else.
That's absolutely wonderful. Wow. Thank you for sharing, Kayleigh. Thank you for being here today. Kayleigh Brendle, everyone. And let's take a listen to It's Beginning to Look a Lot Like Christmas.
It's beginning to look a lot like Christmas. Toys in every store. But the prettiest sight to see is the holly that will be on your own front door.
A pair of hobble-bumbles in the post with the shoes is a wish of Bonnie and Ben.
Dolls that'll talk and we'll go for a walk is the hope of Janice and Jen. Mom and Dad can hardly wait for school to start again. It's beginning to look a lot like Christmas. Everywhere you go.
There's a tree in the Grand Hotel.
One in the park as well.
The sturdy kind that doesn't mind the snow.
It's beginning to look a lot like Christmas. Soon the bells will start.
And the thing that'll make them ring
It's the carol that you sing right within your heart.
I'm Katelyn McIntyre, President of the National Federation of the Blind Performing Arts Division. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Scene Change. If you like what you heard, be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and visit our website at nfb-pad.org. There you'll find links to our social media, membership, and resources for blind performers. Thanks to everyone who makes this show happen. Scene Change is produced by Shane Lowe, Joe Schuneman, Precious Perez, Chris Nussbaum, Seun Choi, and Aaron Jordan, with music by Ryan Strunk and Tom Page. Remember, you can be the performer you want. Blindness is not what holds you back. We'll see you next time.